If you were to ask the average person today who shaped the way we think about reason, science, and philosophy, many might say Aristotle, Plato, or Socrates. Some might even point to great modern thinkers like Descartes or Kant. But hidden between these giants is a man whose work almost got lost in the sands of time, a man who lived in medieval Andalusia, in the crossroads of cultures, where Islam, Christianity, and Judaism often collided and intertwined. His name was Averroes, or as he was known in the Muslim world, Ibn Rushd. Today, he is remembered as the Commentator, the man who revived Aristotle for Europe, preserved rational thought through turbulent centuries, and became a bridge between the intellectual worlds of Islam and the West. But who was Averroes really? Why did he matter? And why should his story still resonate in our age of information overload, religious divides, and the endless tension between faith and reason? Let's journey back to the 12th century, when the world was very different, yet strangely familiar. Averroes was born in 1126 in Córdoba, Spain, at a time when the Iberian Peninsula was under Islamic rule. Córdoba was not just any city, it was the jewel of Al-Andalus, a hub of learning, science, and culture. Imagine streets lit by lamps when much of Europe was still dark, libraries filled with thousands of manuscripts when other regions had barely a handful, and scholars debating philosophy, medicine, law, and astronomy side by side. This was the environment that shaped Ibn Rushd. From a young age, he was immersed in scholarship. His family was deeply respected, known for serving as judges, and young Ibn Rushd was expected to follow this tradition. But he was not content with the law alone. He devoured works on medicine, theology, mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy. Most importantly, he encountered the works of Aristotle, the Greek philosopher whose writings had already filtered into the Islamic world through earlier translators. At this time, Aristotle's ideas were controversial. Some theologians considered them dangerous, fearing that rational philosophy might undermine religious faith. Others, however, believed reason and revelation could work together. Averroes would dedicate his life to this very struggle, how to reconcile faith with reason. One of the reasons Averroes became so famous was because of his commentaries on Aristotle. And these weren't just summaries. Averroes painstakingly clarified Aristotle's works, explained them, and in many cases, defended them against misunderstandings. So influential were his writings that later generations in Europe referred to him simply as the Commentator, as if no one else had explained Aristotle with such brilliance. But Averroes wasn't just a translator or commentator. He believed that human reason had a divine purpose. For him, the use of logic and philosophy was not an enemy of faith but a way to better understand God's creation. He argued that there were different levels of truth, the truth of philosophy, accessible through reason, and the truth of faith, accessible through revelation. And far from contradicting each other, these truths could be harmonized. This was revolutionary because it challenged narrow dogmatism. Averroes stood in the middle of a fierce debate in the Islamic world. On one side were philosophers who pushed rationalism so far that they seemed to dismiss religion altogether. On the other were theologians who condemned philosophy as dangerous heresy. Averroes tried to chart a middle course, insisting that true religion and true philosophy could not be in conflict. But let's not romanticize his journey. Averroes' life was anything but easy. For a while, he rose to prominence in Córdoba, becoming a respected judge and even serving as a court physician. His writings on law and medicine were highly valued. But his defense of philosophy made him enemies. Many conservative scholars accused him of corrupting the faith with Greek ideas. Eventually, political shifts turned against him, and he was exiled. His books were banned, some even burned. Yet, fate had other plans. While some in the Muslim world rejected him, his works were being translated into Latin and Hebrew and spreading across Europe. There, in the heart of the Christian Middle Ages, his commentaries became the foundation of scholastic philosophy. Thinkers like Thomas Aquinas wrestled with his ideas, sometimes opposing him, sometimes building upon him. Without Averroes, much of Aristotle's thought might never have survived to ignite the European Renaissance. In fact, Historians often say that Averroes was one of the bridges that carried Greek philosophy through the Islamic Golden Age into the Western world, shaping science, theology, and philosophy for centuries. He became a link in the chain of knowledge, ensuring that wisdom did not perish when civilizations rose and fell. But what makes Averroes more than just a historical footnote is his relevance today. Think about the struggles we face in our modern world, the tension between science and religion, between faith and skepticism, between tradition and progress. Aren't these the same struggles Averroes confronted centuries ago? When people argue about whether science undermines belief, Averroes whispers from the past, the truth cannot contradict the truth. In other words, if both science and religion are sincere paths to understanding reality, they must ultimately converge. When society splits into extremes, one side clinging blindly to dogma, the other dismissing spirituality altogether, Averroes reminds us that reason and faith can coexist, that wisdom lies not in extremes but in balance. Even his life story carries lessons. Averroes was ridiculed, silenced, and exiled, yet his ideas endured and spread across continents. Knowledge, once released, cannot be contained. His resilience reminds us that truth has a way of surviving, even when people try to bury it. Let's also not forget his practical brilliance. Averroes wasn't just a philosopher, he was a physician whose medical texts were used in Europe for centuries. He wrote on law, blending rational analysis with ethical concerns. He even wrote on astronomy, criticizing and refining Ptolemaic theories. To him, knowledge was a unified whole. Philosophy, science, and religion were not separate silos but different paths toward understanding reality. This holistic vision is something we desperately need today. In our fragmented world, we often divide knowledge into categories, walling off science from philosophy, philosophy from spirituality, and spirituality from daily life. Averroes challenges us to see the unity, to recognize that seeking truth is a single journey with many companions. Now, if you were sitting at a cafe table with Averroes today, what would he say to you? Perhaps he would ask, do you use your reason as a gift? Do you balance faith with logic? Do you see knowledge as something to guard your ego or something to share for the good of all? His words would likely cut through noise and distraction, reminding us that wisdom is not about hoarding ideas but about living them. And in this sense, Averroes is not just a bridge between Islam and the West. He is a bridge between the past and the present, between knowledge and life, between philosophy and practice. He is a reminder that civilizations may rise and fall, but the quest for truth endures.